Welcome to The Journey, a series by ASU Learning Enterprise, one of ASU's three pillars, where we hear from leaders in higher ed and beyond on how education has shaped their journey and how they prioritize lifelong learning. I'm joined today by Lev Gonick, who is Chief Information Officer at Enterprise Technology at ASU, the section of the university that leads the design, agile management of all enterprise infrastructure, applications, products, service, and analytics. So thank you, Lev, so much for being here.
Great to be with you, Shelby.
And a little bit about Lev. He is an educator, a technologist, a smart city architect. He has been teaching, working, and living on the net for more than 30 years. So in addition to his role as CIO, Lev also chairs the Sun Corridor Network at Arizona's Research Education Network, and was also co-founder of an award-winning nonprofit and served as CIO at Case Western Reserve University. So lots of exciting experiences there. And let's just dive in. So in terms of your education, your schooling, Lev, what was your favorite subject in school, your favorite college course?
Well, actually, the first thing that comes to mind is a great class I had on beekeeping. But it'd be probably hard for you or for anyone watching or listening to kind of figure out how to connect beekeeping to the role I have as ASU's Chief Information Officer. So maybe the other sort of, I would say, formative experience I had in my education was actually in one of the hardest classes I ever took, which was statistics. And I didn't think I was going to be able to succeed, Shelby, because it's not my thing. And it ended up changing. Not only did I do really well, but it actually changed my life. So I walked in not knowing exactly what to expect, other than I hoped I would survive and at least pass the course. I ended up actually working in a lab, actually applied lab associated with the statistics professor, because he and I got to talking about things other than statistics. And he invited me into his lab, which was actually doing political survey work. And I actually had a chance to, as an undergraduate, run one of the largest polling services during a U.S. presidential election. And I'll just sort of say it was a great experience, but it also changed my life because I realized the power of technology really when I was 20 years old.
Wow, what a great opportunity to take a leadership role so early on. And next time I want to hear about beekeeping. That sounds pretty interesting too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, could you tell us a bit more about your educational journey? So where did you go to school, and kind of what were the topics that led your education, and how did it impact where you are today, where you landed?
Yeah, interestingly enough, and it's timely as we speak today, and maybe by the time people view it, it'll be a little bit of yesterday's news with a bit of luck. But I actually went to high school in a conflict zone. I went to high school in Israel and lived in an international youth village with young people, teenagers like myself, 15 years old when I went there, from all over the world, including young folks from Arab countries, the international communities like the U.S. and Canada, Australia, and so forth. So for me, that was a really formative experience, learning really about how to get along with people, how to appreciate where people come from, and also to try to figure out how do you work on letting people find what they have in common with each other, how to really kind of figure out how we can create community even when it seems like it's really hard because there's so many conflicting challenges all around us. And honestly, that was very formative. I've spent my entire professional life figuring out how to use technology to actually help overcome inequities, inequalities, be a force for good, for helping advance education, but also for how to advance just community wellness and attending to the priorities that the community have by leveraging technology. And I think in many ways, even as a high school student, that was a big deal for me. And I pursued, my college career In many ways, always finding a way to pull on that thread of how to think about using technology to create community and to help overcome the social injustices that I was obviously part of as a very young person, but found myself attracted to trying to leverage technology to address those issues. And it turns out, that education journey lasted a lot longer than I thought. I ended up on a PhD program, which is the terminal degree you can get in this part of our society, and that was supposed to be 4 years of extra hard work, and it ended up taking me more than 10 years. I ended up with two little children on the dais when I got conferred with my PhD. I had a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old in my hands because my wife made it very clear to me that wasn't actually part of the bargain. We were supposed to finish the PhD well before the family came along.
A lot can happen in 10 years.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it sounds, what I'm taking out from what you're sharing, technology obviously is a through line in your story, so this idea of how can we bring people together who might not have the same worldview or same experiences? How can we address some of these inequities through technology? And I feel like this is a time when so many people are watching what's going on in the world and asking themselves, gosh, what can I do to help, or how can I do something good in the world? And I'm curious if you have some examples of technology, of ways that people can contribute through technology, or maybe some examples of where you've seen that really be.
Sure. Yeah. And again, let me just draw on my own personal experience a little bit by way of background. And then maybe if I have a second, just share a couple examples about things we're doing at ASU. But I grew up and actually did my PhD in Canada. And as part of my PhD studies, I ended up doing some significant amount of work, a year's worth of work in Africa. And we found this was all sort of in the pre-internet age. And one of the things I was, again, working on was, the introduction of new technology into some, in this case, traditional mining communities. But as the internet was being born, and in particular, this is in the early 80s, we found the idea of how could we work to leverage the technologies to actually help the communities that we were engaged with issues that were much more important than what I was studying. And this was the early onset of HIV/AIDS in Africa, and trying to get testing and reviews of tests, medical tests to establish positive HIV. And so we had an opportunity to help establish MangoNet. MangoNet was the very first health internet program in Zimbabwe, which was one of the countries that we were working in. And we actually found a way to bring in some of the technology, the early modem technology that was used. And we worked with the Swiss embassy and the university and some of the healthcare folks to establish really the first network to support sharing between medical professionals in the field, or if you will, the bush, to be able to actually send them into the capital, to Harare, and from Harare, eventually to reviews both in Canada, which is where I was from, by medical professionals there, or Sweden in Stockholm, which was another partner. That for me, Shelby, was like a really early insight as to the power of technology to really address something that was at full borne out was a huge, and still is a huge crisis for that part of the world. And I've always, not only were we able to use technologies, I also learned about how communities that are in duress or can really be anti-fragile, which is to say how they can actually come out even better by using the technology. And I've taken that with me to this part of the world, where, again, working at ASU, we're working to also leverage technology to address the community's priorities, to help them access learning at ASU and more generally, opportunities to use technology to be able to get everything from housing that people are eligible for, all the way to workforce development opportunities and the like. So I see that as one of the central sort of themes here, is to understand that there is a way of organizing, and there is a way of focusing and dedicating ourselves to leveraging technologies for the entire journey of a person's life, to help them learn how to learn, so that they can actually succeed. And I think that's what resonates, I think, more generally for many of us who work at ASU in leadership roles, but it's also why I'm such a huge supporter of and try to be a really good partner with the learning enterprise.
Yeah, and those are great examples that you gave. It seems, when I was asking the question, this idea of how do we leverage technology to address some of the inequalities of the world or to improve people's lives, it seems like such a far away from just how do you even address that? How do you even go about that? But what I'm hearing from what you're saying is that it requires creativity and thinking of, okay, these are the things that we have, these are the issues that we have, what are the ways that they can that we can, move forward.
And Shelby, if you don't mind me
Yeah.
saying, I mean, the other piece of it is that you don't, in order to really attend to the priorities of the community, we need to create partnerships. And
Mhm.
some of the partnerships are technology people. Like, I have the great privilege of working with a fabulous group of individuals, both in my team as well as across all of ASU. But we're also working with community partners who are working on the human networks, not just the technology networks. And it's that partnership. It's actually way more than 1+1 = 2. This is the idea of how to understand the power of being engaged in learning. Is the idea that there is, like, serendipity, the idea that you don't know exactly what you're going to find when you turn the corner, but if you learn how to learn, it turns out that you can use your technology skills to create networks. And if you have really good, communications or human interaction skills, you can create human networks. And actually, together, that's the most powerful part.
Absolutely. And the Learning Enterprise, we are so happy to partner with your organization. I'm thinking even just on AI courses towards the beginning of GPT's entrance onto the world stage. So whenever we can get this to these information to the community, it's always better when we do it together. And, and on the topic of lifelong learning, so it's core to our work at ASU Learning Enterprise, but its definition and this really vary from person to person. So, Lev, I'm wondering for you, what does lifelong learning really mean to you, and what are some ways that you practice it into your life and your work?
Well, I think of it as quite natural, actually, Shelby. Like, in just my immediate response, and maybe that is because I had lots of early wonderful teachers who instilled in me the idea of just how important learning and reading and watching and listening and hearing, working hard to hear what other people are, their stories and what matters to them. And I think that I also come from a family where I think that was also instilled in me, the idea of love of learning along the way. But as I've developed in my professional life, I've always enjoyed balancing learning in the technical work that I have and in the management work and my leadership work, all of those professional things. I try to maintain a very active set of, you might call them hobbies, but really what they are is they're actually ways of broadening out my learning commitments. And so I'm particularly, interested in food and wine, and I am both, I guess you could sort of practitioner in it, but I'm also actually reasonably well read and traveled, and I actually, keep kind of a journal of the things that I'm experiencing in that environment. And that for me is kind of one of the many complementary ways in which I think about the continuing, lifelong journey of, again, appreciating and obviously, in my experience, for me, it's not just about food and wine. It's also how food and wine come to be part of a culture, understanding how people have adapted, um, what stories are told around their dining room tables, and what difference do we, again, this goes all the way back to the beginning of our conversation. We probably have a lot more in common than actually what separates us. And breaking bread and using technology are two ways I've found of actually getting people to sometimes come together to make wonderful things happen.
Absolutely. That sounds like a great idea. A food and wine journal, especially while you're traveling. I'll definitely have to keep that one in my pocket. So that's all I have for you, Lev. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. Um, Anybody else who's watching, you can read the whole transcript of the interview below and find Lev and Enterprise Technology below. And thanks again.
Thanks, Shelby.